This isn't the real Caesar's Palace, is it?
What do you mean?
Did Caesar live here?
No.
I didn't think so.
I went to Vegas last weekend. Pretty crazy.
Vegas, baby, Vegas!
Gentlemen, welcome to Las Vegas.
Why don't you give me half the money you were gonna bet? Then we'll go out back, I'll kick you in the nuts, and we'll call it a day.
Some guys just can't handle Vegas.
Hey there, and welcome to episode number 32 of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast. My name is Jeff, and thank you so much for joining me on this podcast trip to one of the best cities on the planet, fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. Before we get things rolling with this episode of the show, I want to thank everyone who took the time to download and listen to the last episode of the podcast, which was my August trip report. It was great to be able to share reviews on some brand new Vegas restaurants, tell you about my impressions of the newly renovated Flamingo rooms at the Flamingo, and I really appreciated everyone's words of encouragement when it came to my blackjack experience at Ellis Island. If you haven't checked out the episode for yourself yet, jump into the archives wherever you get your podcasts and download episode number 31. Also, if you've got a few spare moments, I'd really appreciate you heading over to jeffdoesvegas.com and hitting the audience survey link. I'm looking for your thoughts and feedback on the show, both positive and negative, so that I can try to create a stellar podcast experience for you, the good listener. All right, let's get started. We begin, as usual, with Vegas news you can use. The MSG Sphere, a new venue, is currently under construction on the Las Vegas Strip just behind the Venetian. It's being billed as a venue that will incorporate all the senses, providing a fully immersive experience featuring the largest and highest resolution LED screen at 160,000 square feet. The sound in the building will also be new technology never implemented before, using what's being called beam-forming technology, meaning that no matter where you're sitting, the sound will be exactly the same. But all that amazing technology comes at a price, and a contractor involved with the project is estimating it to be somewhere around the $1.7 billion mark, or roughly $500 million more than the preliminary budget that was approved by Madison Square Garden Company when construction began. That has investors getting nervous, and as such, MSG stocks dropped by as much as 9.3% on the announcement of the potential cost overruns. Side note, by comparison, T-Mobile Arena, which has hosted hundreds of concerts and sporting events, including being home to the NHL's Vegas Golden Knights, was built for $375 million. The MSG Sphere, which will host concerts, product launches, award shows, and sporting events, is slated to open in 2021. A health warning for Vegas visitors. If you were in Las Vegas at the start of August, you may have been exposed to the measles. The Southern Nevada Health District recently announced that a person who visited Sin City between August 1st and 6th was confirmed to have had the measles, meaning that other visitors during that time may have been exposed. I'll put the full story with all possible exposure locations up in the show notes at jeffdoesvegas.com. But if you were in the area of Mandalay Bay or Luxor within the previously mentioned dates, it's possible that you're at risk. If you're concerned that you may have been exposed, might not be a bad idea to speak with your doctor. And country music fans, take note, Jason Aldean is coming to Las Vegas. The country superstar is all set for a 3-night engagement at the Park Theater at Park MGM with shows on December 6th, 7th, and 8th, with the series being billed as Ride All Night Vegas. The shows will be an extension of Aldean's current Ride All Night tour. Jason Aldean is the reigning Academy of Country Music Awards Artist of the Decade, and of course, who could forget, it was Aldean who was on stage when the shooting broke out at the Route 91 Festival back on October 1st, 2017. Aldean returned to Vegas the following year to be a part of the iHeartRadio Music Festival, but these shows will mark his first non-festival performances in Las Vegas in many years. Tickets for the mini residency are currently on sale. And that's Vegas news you can use. On to the show. I don't know about you, but one of the ways I like to pass time between trips to Las Vegas is by watching movies featuring Las Vegas. And the selection is almost endless. There are literally dozens of films about Las Vegas, from classics like the original Ocean's 11 and Viva Las Vegas, to critically acclaimed films like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and Rain Man, to blockbuster hits like Honeymoon in Vegas and The Hangover. My guest for this episode of the show is David Rosen, the host of Piecing It Together, a movie podcast with a bit of a twist, which he'll explain. I asked David to join me on the show to talk about Las Vegas movies. We discussed some of the best, some of the worst, and of course we shared our own personal favorites. Please enjoy my conversation with David Rosen. David, thank you so much for having me here to do this little podcast chat. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad you were able to come down here to do it. That's always fun.
Well, it's always more enjoyable to be able to come to Vegas to do the talk as opposed to doing it over Skype when I'm up in Canada and my guest is down here enjoying this beautiful weather.
Oh, is that what you call this?
It always amazes me with people here like, this is terrible. I hate this. This is awful. Meanwhile, us Canadians are out there in our thongs and shirtless, showing off our pasty selves because this is the only heat we get. So
Canadians do love Vegas, it sure seems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you are the host of the Piecing It Together podcast.
Yes.
Which is a movie related podcast.
Yes. We take a little bit of a unique perspective in looking at movies through the lens of what other movies inspired them. And this way, instead of just a straight review show, which there's so many of, I wanted to do something a little different and allow us to go on big, long tangents talking about lots of other movies along the way while still reviewing the movie we're talking about. Which
is really cool because, as you say, I think, you know, in the short time that I've been in this little podcast world, it's been hard. It's always hard to try and find sort of a spin on a topic because, again, you know, you run into it with movies. I run into it with Vegas stuff.
Sure.
There's a million Vegas related podcasts out there. So to try and find a unique way to spin on that is always important. And I love the way you found kind of a unique spin on movies. Like you say, it's not just a straight review show.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, it is like, you know, I kind of wanted to do something for a while with movies, but I didn't quite know what to do. And I have another podcast called Bird Road Podcast, which came first, which is more of like a politics and culture and news thing. And I do that with my best friend Q. And I was always making the conversation about movies all the time, and he's like, I don't want to talk about movies every damn episode. So I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to finally do a movie show. But then it was a matter of what is it going to be? And so I'm glad I landed on something people seem to like.
So I want to find out a little bit about yourself as well. We were talking kind of before we started recording a little bit. You are not born and raised here, but you've been here a very long time.
Yeah, just before we started recording, it was 21 years. Before that, I grew up in Pennsylvania in the Poconos, and I was born in New York.
And so what predicated the move to Las Vegas?
Basically, my mom just really liked Las Vegas, and me and my dad, kind of kicking and screaming, gave in and came along. So moved our entire lives and business and everything here. So.
And you were mentioning you guys, your family has a record store here.
Yes, it's called Wax Trax Records, and it's been here since we've been here, and before that in Pennsylvania. Before that, it was mail order in New York. But yeah, it's one of the biggest and best record stores in the world, really. I mean, it's a crazy gem. It's practically like a museum, and people come from all over to come shop at it or walk in and get mad because some of the stuff is like priceless, and my dad prices accordingly. So they don't buy, but yeah, no, it's a really amazing shop. And, like I said, we've got customers from all over the world. People come to Vegas, like just to come to the store. And, yeah, it's over there off, Decatur and Edna, which is right by Sahara.
Very cool. I may have to go check it out as a music guy myself.
Yeah.
20 years in music radio and a long time working in the business. It's, I always love going and seeing that kind of stuff. It always interests the hell out of me. So yeah, I may have to go check that out on this trip.
Definitely.
So let's talk about your interest in movies. I mean, everybody, I don't think you're ever going to find someone who says, "Oh, I hate movies." That's not a thing. Right. But then there's people like yourself who are super passionate about it. Where did that come from for you?
I wonder about that because I didn't go to film school or anything like that, but I've just always loved movies so much ever since I was a kid. I mean, I used to go to movies with my dad a lot, and it's always just been a big thing. And then, the other thing before starting podcasting and still to this day, I compose music for movies. And so really, I never got into composing music to like be in a band or anything like that. It's always been about movies, working in movies, doing things movie related. And so, making music for movies was just, a continuation, I guess, of my, love of movies. But I mean, there's just something about, getting into all these, great stories, interesting stories, like weird, crazy stories. And like, it just, there's always great movies, all the time coming out. And then there's always classics that you skipped over to go and look back on. And there's just so many amazing movies out there. And it's kind of like a never ending thing.
What was the movie that really did it for you? Was there something specific? Like, I know for me, like as a kid, my thing as a big giant nerd was Star Wars. Sure. That was absolutely it. I mean, I was born in 75, so I didn't see the original the first time around in the theater, but I remember seeing it, re-release as a kid. Was there a specific movie for you that really did it?
I mean, I feel like I could answer that question multiple ways depending on various, side tracks I can go through as the movie that made me want to work in music for a movie. What was to make it a podcast or get into indie films or whatever. But I mean, I guess the first thing I remember being just insanely excited about was Terminator 2. I want to say that was 91, I believe. So I would have been 11 at the time. And I mean, of course I had favorites before then, but I just remember when that came out, it was just like the greatest thing ever,
And that was just really, you were like, that's it. I'm hooked on this.
Yeah. I love this. I want to see more of this, Yeah.
That's awesome. So one of the big pastimes for people, and I know people that are like this, and I'm just as guilty of this. In between my Vegas trips, I like to watch movies about Las Vegas. And I mean, I think that goes for anybody that has any kind of passion. They want to, if they're interested in something, they want to watch movies about it. They want to see stuff about it. And for me, it's always about Las Vegas. And that was why, I got in touch with you and I wanted to get you on the podcast, was to talk about Las Vegas movies.
Sure.
And so let's do that.
Let's do it.
Where should we start? Should we start with our own personal faves?
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suspect there's probably going to be some here that, we may have a little bit of crossover. There's probably going to be some that I'm going to say that you're going to go, what are you even thinking? Why are you into that? And it may go the other way. So, being that this is your home, I would love you to have the first draw, so to speak, and your first, personal pick.
Sure. Well, my first personal pick, I'm going to go with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which I actually have only seen a couple times. It's like at the top of my list of movies I've been wanting to rewatch lately, just because it comes up a lot on our podcast, actually. But, I mean, it's just so crazy and just such great performances. And it's just, it really, it looks at Vegas in such a strange, weird way, and it's just, it's such an imaginative movie,
I feel like such an idiot for saying this. I've never seen it.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you gotta watch it. It's wild. It's absolutely wild.
It's one that again, it's one of those ones that's always kind of, I have a list of movies that it's that whole, I should really watch that. But then instead I watch this.
Yeah.
I go with the safe choice, something that I've seen 27 times before, rather than picking something different. But Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas is always one of those movies that's been
I get it.
On that list for me. The first one I want to go with, and this is one of those ones that when I say it, people always kind of chuckle about it, is Last Vegas. That is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. And I think the reason for it is I see a lot of myself and my friends in that movie. I picture me and a few of my buddies 30 years from now doing that trip to Las Vegas, as a bunch of old dudes. I don't know if any of us are going to be marrying a girl half of our age, but
sure.
I see that. I see us in there. And it was one of those movies that for me was just kind of a bit of a sleeper movie that I didn't really expect to like, but it just kind of popped in there one day, and I was like, I'm going to watch that. And now it's one of those movies that I've watched like 11 times instead of watching Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But
nice.
That's for me, that's the one, or one of the ones.
Not a personal favorite for me, but I mean, it was pretty fun though. I could totally see where you would, have so much fun with that movie.
The only thing about that movie that drives me nuts is there's some continuity stuff in that movie. And this, I think, is common in any, in a lot of movies, particularly when you know a city really, really well. There's a whole scene in there when they're walking the wrong direction in front of the Mirage. Let's go to the Aria. And they're walking... walking north on the strip in front of the Mirage. Every time that comes on, I'm yelling at my TV, "You're going the wrong way. What are you doing?"
The guy with a Vegas podcast would definitely catch that.
Yeah.
For sure.
You got another one for me?
Sure. Well, my number 2 pick would be a movie that, honestly, when I was a kid, was my vision of Las Vegas, and that is Vegas Vacation, which is just, it's so goofy and so much fun, and I don't know, I just loved that movie when I was a kid, and it really is like, it kind of lives up if you're just kind of, goofy people, it kind of is what Vegas ends up being once you get here, if you're not one of the cool guys, if
you're not one of the cool people, you are Clark Griswold.
Yeah.
There's no question. You're Clark Griswold trying to give your family that Vegas experience and failing miserably at it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much of a so much of a weight to a Vegas trip. It's like it's got to be this big thing, And it's funny. I have a buddy that just did a Vegas vacation with his family, and he actually, one of the recent episodes of the podcast, I had him on to talk about it, and it was interesting to hear that take on bringing the family to Vegas and bringing the kids to Las Vegas and dealing with all of that. And in my head the whole time, I was just picturing a Griswold vacation in Vegas. Oh yeah.
That in my head, that's exactly where it goes. One of the movies, this one, when you're getting into serious Vegas movies, Casino. You cannot beat, first of all, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Martin Scorsese directing. You cannot beat that combination in my mind. That is just an A1 combination. And then when you throw it into the experience of Las Vegas, and that is somewhat of a true story. I did an interview with Jeff Schumacher from the Mob Museum and talked about the history of the mob in Las Vegas, and the movie Casino came up in our discussion, and he was telling me that is probably one of the more historically accurate Vegas-related movies that's out there.
I believe it, absolutely.
And some of the stories that are told in that movie, and the way it's all sort of brought together. Obviously, there's parts of it that are dramatized because that's what Hollywood's going to do.
Sure.
But in my mind, that's one of those movies. And the other thing too that I always find with that movie is it's one of those ones that every time I watch it, there's something different about it. I don't like Goodfellas is another one of those movies where every time I watch it, I keep thinking, are they continuously editing this movie and adding new things into it?
Yeah.
Because there's stuff every time I watch it, there's new things that pop into this movie that I just look at and I go, how is this? Wait, I don't remember any of it, but it's one of those movies that if it's on, I go right to it. I will watch it.
He's a filmmaker that packs his movies. They're just so rich and just full of so much. And so, yeah, I could totally see that, coming back to it and being like, oh, I didn't even catch that the 15th time I saw it. Now I'm seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like I say, that's one, and Goodfellas is another one that's like that for me. It's just every time I watch it, I'm like, holy hell, I do not remember watching that and seeing that before. So yeah, if it's something like that can come up and really get you, that's a movie that I'm definitely going to use to fill my time.
Absolutely.
For you, another one?
So my next pick would have to be Swingers, which is just so much perfection. It's an incredible movie. Like I said, we weren't exactly the cool guys when we were in our 20s here in Vegas, but we certainly were out all the time, and there was certain little bits and pieces of ourselves that I see in every time I go back and watch that movie, you know, of just being out all night and just doing the Vegas thing, you know, and it's just such a perfect depiction of that life, you know.
It's funny that you go to Swingers and I go to Las Vegas for seeing which Vegas movies we see ourselves in the most. David's like, I see myself in Swingers. Not the coolest guys, but still cool and doing partying.
Yeah.
I see myself as 80-year-old Morgan Freeman wanting to go to bed by 8 o'clock.
See, that's me now, though.
Yeah.
I'm looking back to 20s.
One that I'm going to pick, and I'm going to throw this out. I actually had 5 on my list, and this one I'm going to throw out here. And it's one of those movies that you're going to look at me and go, you're high. Marijuana is legal here now, and as a Canadian, you're clearly smoking a lot of it when you come here. Showgirls.
A worthy movie to talk about.
It's definitely a worthy movie to talk about. I remember when that movie came out, I wrote the date, 1995. I was 20 years old, still probably crushing on Jessie Spano from Saved by the Bell. So the opportunity to see her naked in a movie was clearly, yes, I'm taking that opportunity to see that movie. You can't get around the fact that it is a terrible movie.
Sure.
It's horrible from top to bottom with every bad film cliche in the history of ever. But if that movie is on, I am absolutely watching that movie.
It's one of the most watchable bad movies, like, and not just because of naked women, but because it's like
that helps.
Yeah,
that helps though.
But it's just so much fun. It's just so ridiculous, you know. It's very fun to watch. It's ridiculous. I know they just did like a midnight movie screening at the Palms like last year on it. And I bet it was a lot of fun. I didn't go. I wanted to, though.
I feel like that's one of the movies where they could probably invite several of the stars to show up, because what else do they have going on?
Yeah, definitely.
I had a couple of others I just wanted to throw out there. I mentioned I had 5. They're ones that I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't mention. Obviously the Ocean's movies, 11 and 13. Again, those are movies for me that are just ones that every time I watch them, I see something different. It's like a slightly new movie every time for me. And they're just really good caper movies. You know, they're fun to just sort of follow the story. And then of course, you know, the quintessential Vegas movie, The Hangover.
Yeah. You have to mention The Hangover.
Yeah. I remember seeing that movie for the first time in the theaters and just dying at how funny that movie was. And it's a movie that I've seen dozens and dozens of times, but will still laugh at every single time that it's on. I will kill myself watching this movie.
Yeah, it's so freaking funny, and I only wish 2 and 3 didn't happen, but
yes.
You could put them together into about 20 minutes of good sequel, you know?
Yeah.
That's about it, though. But the first one, there's nothing that's going to take that away, how great the first one is.
No, absolutely. And so then, you know, in that vein, you know, I wanted you to talk about some of the Critics' Choice best kind of Vegas movies to, you know, that if somebody was putting together a list of movies that they wanted to watch that didn't necessarily include the ones that you and I had mentioned.
Sure.
What would you recommend to people?
Well, some other movies that I don't know if I would call it necessarily Critics' Choice. Let's just make clear movies that I just enjoy. Let's put it that way. I actually had a lot of fun with The Incredible Burt Wonderstone. I think it is so stupid, but it is a lot of fun.
Was that
movie.
David Spade? Or was that Adam
Jim Carrey was in it,
Yeah.
and was Ben Stiller in it? I think. Or no, Steve Carell was in it. Yeah, and it's ridiculous, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I thought. Similarly, Dodgeball, which isn't all set here, but certainly has its Vegas parts. Another fun one. More serious movie, a good movie, is The Cooler with William H. Macy, indie film, and just a fantastic little indie film. Have you seen that?
No, I've never seen it.
Definitely something to check out. I mean, that's like a real gritty, like good dark, but like darkly comic movie. Yeah. So it's definitely one to check out. I, of course, had The Hangover and Ocean's 11 on my list as well. And then one other one I wanted to give a shout out to. Good if you're into kind of trashy B-movie kind of things, you know, is a movie I actually worked on. I did music for, called Bus Party to Hell. And
I'm just going to stop you right there. That title again was?
Bus Party to Hell.
That sounds like the greatest movie in the history of ever.
It's pretty freaking incredible. It was made by some Vegas filmmakers, the Mahal brothers, and stars Tara Reid and a bunch of other people. And it starts out in Vegas, then moves its way. They're on their way to Burning Man, and the bus gets taken over by demons and stuff. And in the middle of the desert, it's a movie. Normally you hear about like these B movies that are just filled with boobs and gore. And then you watch them and it's actually like, you know, an hour of boring and then 30 minutes of good stuff. This is 90 minutes of boobs and gore and my music. So it's a movie worth checking out. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Is that online somewhere?
Yes, it's available on, I think, Prime right now. It was on Red boxes for a while as well, but I think it's on Amazon Prime right now.
You know what? I'm going to go home and subscribe to Prime specifically for that. I'm using my 30-day trial to watch the crap out of that.
It's worth checking out for sure.
That sounds amazing. Oh, man. Any others that you want to toss out there just as quick recommendations at all?
Those were all of the ones that I had as the good ones, you know? Yeah. I had a couple bad ones that I wrote down.
Now, those are always the fun ones that absolutely, because again, this is it's always funny how it's the bad ones that cause controversy, because those are the ones where people you'll say, oh, it's the worst movie. That's terrible. What, are you kidding? That's the greatest movie in the history of ever. So, so these would be selections for movies that you would say, don't bother, don't waste your time, avoid at all costs.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, what do you got for that? I'm just curious. I want to hear it. Do you have some bad ones?
I didn't really have a list of bad ones prepared. I found, again, for me, I hate to say I'm picky when it comes to movies, but I really am. The only one that I can think of that I always kind of thought of as a bit of a stinker, honestly, was Mars Attacks.
Okay, I haven't seen Mars Attacks since I was a kid. I loved it back then, and I know the general opinion is that it's terrible, but I like to claim that I still like it. Just because it's I don't know, it seems good in hindsight.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Other than that one, I've been pretty lucky. I've never really come across any horribly terrible Vegas movies. I've been pretty lucky.
Well, really, I already mentioned The Hangover 2 and 3, which was part of my list, which, I mean, they're really pretty damn bad.
Hangover 3 was so terrible.
Yeah.
And it was another one of those ones that had the bad continuity stuff in it, too, in that I vaguely remember a scene where Mr. Chow is hang gliding off the top of Caesar's Palace and somehow manages to land on Fremont Street. And if that didn't happen, then clearly my brain was just filling in parts to make up for how terrible it was.
Sure.
But I just remember that happening and going, that's not a thing.
Yeah. Well, I only wanted to actually mention one other bad one, and that's because I know a lot of people who work in Vegas film, and I don't want to disparage a movie that maybe one of them worked on or anything like that. So I'm just going to mention What Happens in Vegas with Ashton Kutcher and was it Cameron Diaz, I believe, which was absolutely just awful.
I watched a trailer for that whilst I was kind of looking into, Vegas related movies to see, what might come up in our conversation. And that was one of the trailers that popped up, and I just looked at it and went, somebody in Hollywood greenlit that.
Yeah. It's hard. Seriously, it's still hard to believe after all these years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's amazing too when you look at some of the swings that actors have done. I mean, Nicolas Cage, 2 very big Las Vegas related movies.
Yeah.
Leaving Las Vegas, which, I'll freely admit to watching that movie. I was probably way too young to watch that movie. I was probably about 16 or 17 years old.
Actually should have been mentioned in our list of great movies.
Yeah. It's one that I should probably go back and watch because as a late teenager, that movie was traumatizing. And you watch the trailers and you see the fun part where he's pushing the shopping cart down the liquor store aisle, and then you start watching, you go, oh my God, he's drinking himself to death in this movie. This is not a good movie for a 17-year-old to be watching. This is terrible. But then follow that up with Honeymoon in Vegas, which really, on the other end of the spectrum from the drama to the comedy, and kind of almost on the spectrum from the good to the not terrible, but not great side of things.
Yeah. I haven't seen that in a long, long time. I love Nicolas Cage, so I'm curious if I would like it going back to it now.
I wonder if it's one of those movies that maybe there's a lot of movies out there that, and you would know this, that don't age well.
Right. Yeah.
And I wonder if that's one of those movies that just wouldn't necessarily age well. I'm wondering, how cheesy would it be when you look at it at this point?
Right.
It did feature a Bruno Mars cameo though, as a small child. He was it was a child Elvis impersonator. I'm pretty sure it was Honeymoon in Vegas. If it's not, somebody's going to tweet me and tell me I'm totally wrong.
That seems likely.
I could just absolutely be making this stuff up as I go along.
I believe you 100%, hook, line, and sinker.
Sure. I've always said, as long as you sound like you know what you're talking about,
that's right.
That's the main part. As long as you can pull that off, that's
there
the big thing. Anything else you want to toss in? Any other movie suggestions you want to throw out for Vegas related stuff, or anything else that you think people may enjoy watching?
I know that if you go to the Nevada Film Office website, you can find a list of movies that were shot here in Vegas and the rest of Nevada. And one movie that came out this year, it's actually one of the better movies this year. It's not Vegas specifically, but I figured I'd just give it a quick plug. It's called The Mustang. We just covered it on Piecing It Together just a couple of weeks ago. It was shot up in northern Nevada near Carson City, and it's just a beautiful movie. Really, really good. One of the better movies of the year this year. And so, not a lot. Most of the movies we talked about that we loved that were Las Vegas or Nevada movies we love because they're like silly and fun and whatever. Not a lot of like just straight up great movies. You know what I mean? And so it's good to see a great movie shot here. And so you can find, information on a lot more movies shot here on that website. I think it's nevadafilm.com.
Perfect. Excellent. And if people want to find you online and check out your podcast, and of course I absolutely implore them to. It's as you said earlier, it's such an interesting take on movies, because it's not just such a straight movie review podcast, which is a lot of fun. If people want to find you online, where can they do that?
Yeah, well, they can find Piecing It Together wherever you're listening to this, most likely, and also at piecingpod.com. Find us on social media at piecingpod, and we have a Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation that we start on the podcast.
Excellent. David, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and chat today and inviting me into your home studio. I appreciate that a lot, and wish you all the best.
Absolutely. And hopefully you come stop by at Wax Trax while you're on this trip. Yes, absolutely. My wife may not be happy about it, but I brought the big suitcase. So there you go. Nice. That wraps up another edition of the show. If you've got feedback to share on this episode of the podcast, or any other episode for that matter, feel free to reach out via Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas. And if you're looking for suggestions or ideas of where to stay, where to eat, what shows to see, or what to do on your own Vegas vacation, get in touch via social media or contact me directly via email at jeff@walkernewmedia.com. As for my next Vegas vacation, I'm looking at a quick in-and-out trip from November 1st to 3rd to watch the Vegas Golden Knights and the Winnipeg Jets at T-Mobile Arena, but that's about it for now. If I can sneak in a quick trip elsewhere, I will. Otherwise, I'll just have to live vicariously through your Las Vegas trips, so feel free to share your photos and stories with me. In the meantime, thank you so much for listening. Be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know as soon as new episodes are posted. Be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Podbean. And don't forget to head to jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been episode number 32 of the Jeff Does Vegas podcast, a Walker New Media production.